Hi everyone. So today we're going to be talking about introduction to programming using JavaScript. Um, in the last class we talked about introduction to programming, where we discussed what programming is, understanding programming languages, machine language. We talk about high-level programming languages and low-level programming languages. We also talked about scripting languages. We also talked about mm, we talked about what we can do with programming languages, and then which is building mobile applications, building web applications, building Android applications, generally using programs to instruct the computer on what to do to make our lives easier and faster. So, and then we went ahead to talk about data structures and arrays, and then loops, and then we talked about functions and all that. So today I'm going to be doing a more of a kind of a clarity video, a video that kind of this part we're not dealing with theories again. We're going to be using code to actually understand all those theories we explained in the last class. We're going to be explaining them with code so you have a better understanding of what we're talking about. We also talked about syntax and syntax error in our last class. Syntax error, we talk about programming grammar. Programming grammar is more like how you speak the language. Programming is like a natural language, same way you speak English as a language, speak Spanish as a language, speak French as a language. Same goes to programming language, just that these languages are different languages, but only the computers understand this language. Same, just as the human language, the humans understand languages, then computer understand programming languages. So in programming, there are things we do like there's a way we write some programs. It will give a wrong perception to the computer, and the computer being dumb, it won't correct us because it doesn't have an intelligence of its own. Rather, it will tell us, you just did this thing the wrong way. And it's now up to us to correct it. That's when we now have what we call syntax error, and it comes with not writing code the right way. So, but today we've done with all those theories. Today we're going to be talking about code. And then we also talked about variables, loops, functions, and all that. So we're going to be dealing with the code part of it today. So today we're starting with variables. Okay. So what are variables? Variables are um, containers that helps you to store values in the computer memory so that you can be able to use that values or those values later on in your program. That's what variable does. A variable can help you to hold an item of any data type at all. That's the beauty of it. So we talked about data type before. We have different forms of data type. So but we'll talk about that later. So variable is just a container that helps us to create a memory unit. We just go to whenever you declare variable, what happens is that it goes to the computer memory and then tells the computer, please, I need a space. I need like a one room apartment in this place, and I want you to keep it for me. And then and I will move in and put my load there, move in my properties. That's what variable is. The properties you move into the apartment is the values you assign to that variable. And then the space itself is the variable. The name you give to the variable is the name of your house, or maybe the number is more like a hotel when you have room number. So the room number is the name of the variable, and then the persons or the people inside the rooms are the values you assign to that variable, and the hotel itself is the memory unit of the computer. So I believe that analogy makes sense. So there are different ways to define variables in different programming languages, but here we're sticking to JavaScript. So JavaScript has a couple of ways you can define variables. We have the let keyword. Using the let keyword, we have the let keyword, let num equals to 1. We have the const keyword, we have the const keyword, a equals to 2, and then we have the var keyword b equals to 3. Now, um, a number, we have this. The difference between all these things is that num here can be defined and not assigned a value. Same goes with var. These are the special keywords. The let, the const, and the var, the special keywords used to define variable in JavaScript. Whenever you define a variable in define a variable in JavaScript using the let keywords, the let keywords kind of helps you to the let keywords kind of helps you to like you can define the variable, like you can pay for the apartment and then move in later. Same with the name, but you can create the memory space for yourself in the computer memory, and then later you now decide what to assign to it. You can create the variable and decide what will be assigned to it. So in doing that, for us to do that, we can say let vx this. And then later we can assign Vx a value, right? So, but with const keyword, you can't do that. Const keyword is assign value at the point of declaration. We can't do something like this. Oh boy, we cannot do something like this. It's not possible. It will throw error already. Const declaration must be initialized. So there has to be an initialization. Initialization is giving it a value. So it has to be the way it was. So, but with the var keyword, you can do the same thing we have here, vy with var, and later we'll assign them. You understand? So, but these are the ways to declare variables in JavaScript. Const must be initialized at the point of declaration. So now, how to work with variables. So, like I said, a variable can hold different data types, but there are ways whereby we can. Let me change this variable to. Okay, let me declare another variable. Let's call this one let first name, last name. Now the beauty of this is that with let or var, you can initialize multiple variables in one line and use it later, right? But it is not. It is however you want it. I can choose to bring this one down and put another keyword, but these are just ways you can do stuff. Now here we're going to be working with. We want to assign this first name a value. My first name is Victor. Then last name is Annie. Now, if you notice, I use double quote here and I use a single quote here. And some of these variables are use numbers. Now, this is when we'll talk about data types, but we won't really go much into it. When you are defining a string is any text wrapped up in single quote or double quote. This is a single quote and this is a double quote. So any text that is wrapped up within a single quote or a double quote is a string in JavaScript. So when you assign that to a variable, it means that variable is holding a string data type. Now, sometimes you can put numbers within quotes. What JavaScript is going to interpret those numbers as string, not as numbers. But when you put numbers, just numbers, then JavaScript will now see them as numbers and not as string, right? So because the way you manipulate numbers is different from the way you manipulate string. That is why it is good to take note of this. Here we're going to be how to work with variables. Now, the reason why we create variables is so that we can reuse them. As you can see now, we created this variable up here, first name and last name, but it is in this place that we decided to use it. We now give it a value. We've given it a value. Now, what if we want to join these two together? Or let's say somewhere in our code, we decide, okay, we need to call first name here, and we've already defined it. I don't need to come and maybe, let's say I wrote a code that is about 1,000 line, and at the 1,000th line, I will remember I need to write a name, and I'll come and start remembering different names that I use. But had it been if I define, let's say I define a constant called full name, and I define it to be null, and I come here, this won't work, but let's try. But I know it won't work. Okay, I think it worked. Anyways, but let's see. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what the console will give us. Before I talk about this, first of all, when you are working with JavaScript, one of the ways, there are plenty ways you can display whatever you are working with in JavaScript. But JavaScript is a language for the browser. In as much as there's a provision for it on the server, it remains the browser language. First, it was a browser language before it transitioned to what it is today. And we can do quite a lot of things with JavaScript, but we want to run our JavaScript as of today in the browser. Now, if you go to our tests.html, we use this script tag to import our JavaScript. You can write your JavaScript within HTML, but we don't want to do that. We want to import it whereby our JavaScript file remains separate. So because we are calling our file here, if we run this test.html in the browser and open the browser development tools, we should be able to see our our code or the display our JavaScript code. Now, if you want to go to the browser, you click on inspect, you right click in your browser and click on inspect page. When you click on it, don't worry about all these things you're seeing here. This is basically your HTML document. But here is where you declare, you see the output of your JavaScript. Now, as you can see, that code we wrote, we're having an error. It says uncut type error, assignment to constant variable at this. That means constant variable are not meant to be reassigned. Once you've declared a constant variable, it is declared permanently. You cannot change the value at runtime. So here we did something. We declared it to be null. What it means that this variable will remain null forever. And then we are coming here to say first name and last name is equal to full name, which is wrong. We're not going to get any answer. So let's trash that and then use um, and then use let's use something else. Now we can assign a variable to another variable. As you can see, I just did that in our full name. Let me leave this the way it was. Let me leave this the way it was. Let's come here and say let's full name equals to first name and last name. Now, how do we do last name? What do we do? How do we join this together? If we do last name, are you seeing it? We are running into an error, right? So something is wrong. What then do we do? First of all, let's run this our code and see what it will give us. Let's console log. Console log is a method used to display your code in JavaScript. It means, okay, log this action, log this method, log this string, log this thing to the browser console or to the console. So here is our browser console and we are logging this. And as you can see, we've logged our first name and it gave us Victor. If you click on this, this is the where it exists on our code on line 18. And if you go back to line 18, you will see on line 18, this is where our code lives. And then the browser is also telling us that this is happening on line 18. And this is the code we are putting. So here, remember source is where it show you, console is here. So we are console logging Victor here. But then how then do we join this last name? For us to have a full name, we need first name and last name. How then do they now talk about concatenation? That's what we'll talk about, concatenation in JavaScript. Concatenation in JS. Excuse me. So this concatenation helps us to join multiple strings together. Can help us to also join multiple variables together so long as they are string. Concatenation only deals with string. You can only concatenate a string. You cannot concatenate a number because what is used to do a concatenation in JavaScript is the plus sign, the addition operator, right? So if assuming the first name and last name is a number and we do first name plus last name, it's going to add the number. So we only do concatenation. A concatenation only happens with string data type or string variables. So if I add a plus sign and put my last name here, you see, it's now Victor. But we have a challenge. They are together, we needed a space. So two things are involved here. It's either we come to this variable here, we give space in the name Victor, and then it will happen, or we decided to concatenate a space. This is also a string. This is also seen as a string. Remember, anything wrapped inside a quote is a string in JavaScript. So, so long as there is a space here, the space will still be rendered, and then we have the space here. We have Victor. So that is concatenation. Now, assuming first name, okay, let's declare a variable again. Let's declare a variable here called okay, we already have a constant called x. So let's declare another constant called y. The reason why it's throwing error with this full name is because we've already, and see here, I'm defining the full name and I'm assigning it. That's what we're doing here. So let's do the same thing let's create a variable called sum equal to x plus y. And we decide to come to log sum. You see, what it gave us is what? It gave us 2 because x is 1, y is 1. It gave us 2, so 1 plus 1 is 2. So it didn't concatenate it for us. But assuming we have enclosed this one, the string, then the JavaScript will interpret it as a string and then output it for us as a string. Are you seeing it's displaying 11 for us because it's 1 1. You seeing? So that's it for that, for string and variables. So up next, we're going to be talking about, um, remember these basics of programming. So we're not really going to go deep. So let's talk about data types in JavaScript. Data types, we have lots of data types. We have a number of data types in JavaScript. Now remember, okay, I didn't mention comments, but let me define a comment for us here. These other ones I'm using are called single line comments, and but here I want to define a multiple line comment. That's why I use for you to define a multiple line comment in JavaScript. This is how I do it. So I have the array, objects, boolean, number, um, array number, integers. We have um, objects. We have string. We've mentioned string. We have number. We've mentioned number. We have uh, okay. We have undefined. Okay. Just checking out something. So we have undefined. These are the basic data types in JavaScript. So we have the let's declare a variable called array plus r. Excuse me. Arrays in JavaScript are denoted by the square brackets, then quotes inside. This quote is determined by the type of data type you want, because assuming I want to put a data type of number, I don't need a quote. I can just put 2, comma 3. Now, what is an array? Array is a variable that holds multiple data type. So is a data type on its own that helps us to hold a group of data. So instead of a single data holding a single data, so arrays help us to group a data. You understand? So it's usually indexed like starting from zero. It usually counts from zero. So like for example, in computer understand that the items here are three, but the counting stage is not does not start from one. It starts from zero. So this has an index of zero, index of one, and index of two. So these have indexes starts from 0 to infinity. So but for this array, this one is 0 to 2, which means it's 3. Now you can have arrays of arrays in JavaScript, but most of the time JavaScript is not big on array, it's an object language. It's only in other languages like PHP you have PHP is not an object language. It's basically an array. They use array a lot in PHP, but in JavaScript you use an object a lot. We're going to be seeing how an object is defined in JavaScript. So you can define some group of data and decide to use them later on. Let's say you can define, um, let's say name. You can define name, age 24, 23. You can define address. So, but array does not give meaning to data. Do you understand? In JavaScript, yeah, array does not give meaning to data like that. It just helps to group it, to gather a group of data which you can iterate over. You can loop through. We'll talk about loop later on. So then let's talk about objects. This is basically how to define an array in JavaScript. So arrays are used So about objects. Object, which is the basis of JavaScript as a language. JavaScript is used to and control log this to be sure we don't have an error. So as you can see in the browser, we are able to display name, the number, address, and as you can see, this the counting started from 0, 1, 2. It's an array of three numbers, but we have three items, but we have the counting start from 0. That is to tell you how it is being indexed in JavaScript. Today, next up is objects. Object is just we have okay, let's say let's person. We have a person object. Now, what JavaScript did with object is that it tried to model a real world event. Array does in JavaScript, array doesn't provide you with that ability to model a real life event. You understand? And more like does not provide you the ability to have an organized or arranged data. But object helps you to put more context to data and then it will make more sense. For example, I am defining a person object now. What defines a person? If you want to list the characteristics of a person, you can say a person has a name, can even go as far as saying first name, Victor, you add comma because we're adding multiple items. We have last name, we have let me see how I'm doing this as if I'm writing PHP. Sorry guys. This is PHP syntax for defining associative arrays, not JavaScript. Sorry about that. So thank God for syntax highlighting object and text editors. So we have age, and then let's say age is 35. Have address, remote address. So this is the basic information of a person, right? With this now you can access everything about this person. One funny thing about this array is that you can only access them using their index. For example, if I do something like 0 now to get only the name, someone who is reading this or who doesn't know how this array is defined might not know which index is 0, right? Let me console log it. Let's see. You see, in our first index is name, is giving me name. This 2 is coming as a result of the sum we did here. So let's comment out the sum so we know what we're dealing with. As you can see, we only have name here, right? So if we do with the second index, we have 23, right? As you can see. So, but in what's it called? Object provides more context and it makes things a lot more easier to read. I can decide to say console log person dot first name, and then we have Victor. Anybody that comes to read this code or whatever, if I choose to use this somewhere else, if I call the person object and decided to like not use everything and call the, you see, it's quite easy and accessible and readable, right? So that is what object provides. It provides you, it means to have an arranged data. You understand in JavaScript. You can decide to use last name also. You can see it. So these are just the way, and we can even decide to output everything and it will give us in order to which we define them. So as you can see, address, age, first name, last name, right? So that's that for objects. That's how it is defined in access. There are more to this because you can have chained and nested objects. We can decide to have, okay, qualifications. Let's say Objects can come in different types. Let's say education, right? Education. Education can even be another object. And then we can say primary education. Primary education, say make command, secondary school. And then you can say higher education or tertiary education. Let me say higher, so the higher education. I have, let's say, university. I know how to spell university again. Okay. No, 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 no. Yeah, I think I'm correct. University of Ife, right? And then I can decide to have certifications. Now, this one is not going to be, this one is going to be an array. I can decide to have certifications on cloud engineer, JavaScript developer, Google experts in Firebase. So as you can see, we have quite a lot of data here, but this is a complete object of a person. Now, you might have a code where you need to define a full attribute of a person whereby it contains the person's name, address, phone number, email address, education background, or you are writing an application that generates a CV for a user once they create an account. So once a user creates an account, you create this object for the person and then they ask them to provide all the information. And you populate it in an object and you can save it in a database. That's the use case. Now, if we decide to output this education now, as you can see education, we have primary education, higher university certifications. We now have cloud engineer, JavaScript developer, this, that. You can even go further to even use chain to, let's say we want the certification. Ah, certifications only gives us the array, right? Now, if we want to even access the arrays, we can use one to get the certifications. It gives us only cloud engineering. So I believe this is clearer now. Let's go over to what other data type do you have? A Boolean data type. Boolean is true or false. Boolean data type helps when writing conditional statements. It is used to define true or false statements in programming. Basically, this should be in a multiple line comment. So let me copy and paste them here. We have it here. Then we have so how do we define a boolean? I can even define a constant and say this constant must be true. But you can't do this because true is a reserved keyword in JavaScript as well as false is also a reserved keyword in JavaScript. So you don't use them. But I can define an item to have them as a value. Let's say male must be a male. So here we say true. This helps us to know that whenever this main variable is called, we will know that it's going to evaluate to true because we assign it a true value. Then animal equals to false. So we've given this a value. So you see, it doesn't have a number or a quote. It's just truth value. How do you use this? You use this most times when you are making a conditional statement. What is a conditional statement? Are if statement. You can say if male, that means if male is true. Or sorry, if animal is true. If animal is true, say let's say console log animal seems to be true. Else, that's why it's a conditional else. If it's not true, what else will it be false? So you see, if it's false, it means animal is not false. It means to say animal is false. So it's even rendering already. Animal seems to be false because it is false. Now, assuming we have male here, what it will always evaluate true to render something for us to say animal seems to be true. So you see, this can also go instead of using these constants that we define, you can even go direct and use true or false. If true, if false. So this will always render to false. So it's used Boolean data type are used in conditional statements. If statements are used to check whether something evaluates to true or not. Then we'll have which other one do we have here? We have the number. We've talked about the number data type. Then we have the undefined. Now let's say I say let me console log a variable that does not exist, Savvy, and I say console log Savvy is not defined. So, but this is not an undefined statement. Undefined is when a variable does not evaluate to be true. So let me let's use scope. Let's now talk about scope a bit. So as you can see, I declared a variable inside this if statement, but when I called it here, it didn't work. Well, it's what we call scope in programming or JavaScript. Yeah, variables that are defined within a certain block of code can only function within that certain block of code. You can't have access to it outside that block of code. But when you use a constant also has scope. If I declare a constant within this block of code, that constant is only usable within this block of code. Same thing goes with any type of variable, but when we use, if you want to declare a global variable, like everything we have here outside here are all global variables, it does not exist within a block of code, so we can reference it. But when you chain it or cage it into a block of code, you won't really have access to them. And then when you're trying to access them, you get the value of undefined. But what we're having here is what we call data type. I'm sorry, reference error. So let's see data type, sorry, reference error, meaning we are referencing a variable that does not exist, right? Then an undefined data type usually happens when maybe you defined a variable. Okay, let's try something. I'm just looking for a better way to explain this so we can understand it. Okay, so I think I've got one. So here now we have this thing called, what we were having before was called reference error. It's not a undefined error. An undefined is not really an error. It's just a data type that helps us to identify when an item is not assigned any value. Now, and we are trying to use it. This is an empty container. Zav is an empty container. It does not have any value assigned to it. But here we are trying to use it. It's not going to give us anything. So it's just practically telling us that this value is practically undefined. It's just like when we have a null statement, a null data type. Yes, there's also a null data type. Sorry, I didn't include it here. Let me include it. So we have a null data type. What that does is it makes an item null as good as give make an item empty. So, but we cannot actually use an empty variable. When a variable is empty, we not assigned at all to any value, you get an undefined. So, if you want a variable to just be empty at initialization, maybe later you so that when you want to use it mistakenly, it will not throw undefined. You can assign a null value to it, and later you use them. You can reassign. I can come here at the point of use data and say Xavi is a player. So as you can see, it's no longer null. It's a player, but it was defined to be Xavi. So I think that's basically it for introduction to programming using JavaScript. I believe in our next class, things will make a lot more sense. Lest I forget, we have functions as well. Functions help us to, we're going to define only two functions. Functions help us to run a piece of code over and reuse a piece of code over and over again. You understand? Functions are made up of the function keyword, the name of the function, and we have the parameters. Sometimes not all functions need parameters. We can just run a function that displays the person object. So, but functions don't run on C, they are called. So if we come here and say display person, this is the name of the function. So if we come here and call the display person function to run here, so anytime, as many times we run this function, so we can reuse it over and over again. See, if we call this function, see how many times it's displayed in the browser. That's because we've already declared this person variable somewhere, and then we are calling it globally. We are reusing it here, and this function can be reused multiple times. The essence of using function is that it helps us to reuse code as often time as we can. And then there are functions also that have arguments. Let's do a function that adds two numbers. So we want this function to add number A and number B, right? These are the things we want the function to add. So, and say let sum equals to A plus B. And then let's say console log some. Now, this function will only run whenever we call it. Now, for us to call it, we need to give it, this is what we call function argument. This thing we declare, we call here, call function argument. It can be 1, it can be 2, it can be 3. But if it is more than 1, you separate it by comma. What that means is that whenever this function is going to be called, we have to provide those arguments because those are the inputs it needs to work. These are function inputs. So they need to work. So whenever we call this addition function, sorry I'm putting this here. Let me remove it here to avoid confusion so that we won't be confused. A and B are called function arguments, or you can refer it to be the input the function needs to work. So when we call this value, let's say we call add, then we put 2 or 20 and 40 gives us 16. Let me remove the display person function we call there. And if you leave this thing like this, will it work? No, it won't work. If functions always come to parentheses, you need to always add a parenthesis. But there are functions you declare like this, just like this, without the parentheses. These are functions that are tied to a variable, but we'll see how that works later on. So here now we have 20 plus 40. So anytime we call this function, we can reuse it as many times as we can. We also have functions. There are many ways to write functions in JavaScript, but I'm going to put out something else here. If you want your function to serve as a variable, you want your function to serve as a variable, you can say minus, let's write a function called minus, and then we define it like this, call it minus. Okay, we've already given it a name. Here in this pattern, you don't need to give a name again because the name, it will pick its name from the variable name. And then we'll say it's going to have an argument called maybe x and y. You can even write a function that can plot a graph for you. So x and y. So you have to say let um, sub equals to x minus y. And so log sub, right? So anytime we call this subtract, it will definitely run. But because this subtraction has an argument tied to it, 3 and 1, 4, you see it, give us the number. But I want us to write a function that does not require an argument. Let's say a function that calls the certification of a person. Let's say const certification or sats. Let's just call it sats. And then there's a different way we define function in JavaScript. And define function like this. So, sorry guys. Let me go with the first one. Sorry. Yeah. So we have something like this. This one is not that complicated. We have something like this, and then when we call console log stats, guys, I think we'll deal with functions later. Okay? We'll talk about that later when we finally go into functions. I need to be specific with this. I don't want to confuse us. So basically, they can write functions in different ways, but the two method I gave us is function, the name of the function, then the argument box, and then the code block inside. So yeah, sometimes the function can have argument, sometimes it doesn't have an argument. So this is where we'll wrap it up for this class. We'll talk about it. We'll discuss further about JavaScript when we enter the JavaScript phase of this training. Thank you everyone and see you some other time. If this video was helpful to you, please and to like, share, subscribe. See you soon.